so I can send it to you later. Okay, embroidery. Welcome to my class. Embroidery is a stitching discipline that, like needlework, like some people do needlepoint, some people knit and crochet. Embroidery is a decorative stitching, but its roots are not so much in decoration as it was with purpose, piecing fabrics together in an attractive way. When cloth was very expensive, people would have to remake their clothes or mend them in a way that they were proud of their sewing skills. And also, when you cover a fabric with another layer of whether it be wool or silk or some kind of thread, you're strengthening that fabric and you're making it thus warmer and more sturdy. But we tend to know of embroidery as mainly decorative stitching. Machine embroidery, like the smocking on my dress, machine embroidery is usually just one stitch. It's like a just a straight stitch that's varied in color of thread and in length of stitch. But we're going to be learning a lot of different stitches and a couple foundation stitches today that are the root of many other stitches. So most of you, in fact, I hope all of you, have brought a certain intention to this class. Some of you may have experience in needlework. Some of you have maybe never even threaded a needle before or sewn on a button, or you may have already been embroidering but want to learn new stitches. So everyone is approaching this from their own set of intentions. But what I want to do now is go over the materials. My previous email, I told you all you really needed was a needle and thread today. I didn't want you to go out and buy all kinds of stuff that you may not need. And I also didn't want to put you at risk for going out to stores in the middle of a plague. So what I would like to do is go over the materials, and then you can decide what you think you might need or might have on hand already that you can use. So the first thing I want to talk about are the needles and the thread. Now I have a whole pack of needles, and I also have like this needle case. When I used to take the train, this is my embroidery kit. I used to take on the train, and I have like this little needle booklet of pages of felt that I would just preload my needles. I'd already string them up with colors or thread them with colors, so I'm ready to go. And then on the train, I would just do these mindless little designs that are just free form, like sketching. And because I couldn't take knitting on the train, it's too much of a bother. So I would wind up with all these strips of fabrics and all these designs, and people say, what are you going to do with that? Like, I don't know, I'll figure it out someday. But you can embellish things like jean jackets, and this I think was a napkin that I just covered with all kinds of stitchery. And I don't know, I mean, maybe it'll make a pillow or whatever. You can start with a blank piece of muslin or a pillowcase, which is when I was about 7, my grandmother taught me how to embroider, and she started me out on an old pillowcase. You can also buy kits. There are different companies. One of them is Hirschner's. I'll put that in a link, HERRSCHNERRS, I believe, where you can get these kits that come with all the thread you need. They come with a canvas that is already stamped. I've been working on this for about 10 years, but you can see that it's already stamped where with the design, and then it will come with a legend where it will say, you know, what color thread and what stitch, and it will have a whole code or a legend. So you can buy kits if you don't want to just, you know, free form it and rift it on your own. That's fine. There's many things that you can embroider. I have my cut-off jeans from the 1970s that I embroidered that still fit, but it's not pretty anymore. So a lot of people like to do jean jackets, and it's also very helpful. I left it upstairs, but I caught one of my patch pockets on a kitchen drawer knob and I ripped it. So I said, why don't I just make it an attractive stitching to mend it? So it has a little bit of character to it, and then, you know, just put my own stamp on it. So there's lots of applications for embroidery. It's the kind of thing that you can do mindlessly in front of the television or while you're watching Netflix on a snowy day. It's really coming out. I don't even want to look out there right now. But let's get down to the materials. Needles. I have tons of needles, but this is a package of, these are called yarn darners, but they have big-eyed needles. I do have a package of embroidery needles with my sack of needles. And you can get, you know, a package of 50 assorted needles that have all different lengths and size, eyes. Embroidery needles are also called ballpoint needles. These are hand needles, but basically an embroidery needle has a slightly larger eye because what we thread the needle with is embroidery floss. Now, embroidery floss, before I thread the needle, I've got to show you what we're going to thread it with. This is a package of the DMC Embroidery Floss, which is pretty much the main brand, you know, like Coca-Cola is the main brand of the cola industry. DMC is pretty much the gold standard. You can buy on Amazon. They have all kinds of embroidery kits. I got this big, there must have been 30 different colors in here, but it's not as smooth and silky as the DMC. This is like a no-name floss. So there is quality among the different brands, and it's really not expensive. A skein of embroidery floss, when places like Joann's Fabrics have a sale, you can get 4 for $1. Sometimes they're 59 cents a skein, 89 cents a skein. If you're paying over $1 a skein, you're getting ripped off, unless it's silk. There are some silk embroidery flosses that are up to $5 a skein, but we're going to be working with cotton because it's the most basic. Now, when you buy a skein, you're going to see there's 2 tubes of label on the end. Oh, this is one long tube. All right, it used to be 2. Now they're making them different. But on the DMC brand, if you find the end of your thread on the long side of the label, that's where you want to pull it from. And it should come out nice and easily. I have in my embroidery basket, before I learned this trick, this is not something that my grandmother taught me 60 years ago. I used to pull the skeins from the wrong end, and that's why my embroidery basket looks like this, because it's like a rat's nest if you pull it from the wrong end. Now, many manufacturers are trying to make it user-friendly from both ends. on this one. Okay, here's my end on a short end, on the short side of the label. I'm going to try and pull it from, because you hold it from one end or from the label and you pull it from the other. Okay, this is user friendly. I pulled it from the short label end and it's coming out. Now, usually we work with a length around 18 inches. If you cut a piece that is a yard long, it's going to be rather unwieldy to work with. You're going to be, you know, stretching your arm and you're going to be making knots because it's just so long and unmanageable. So I usually cut a length of the floss that is about 18 inches, 24 inches. And I cut my floss at an angle with my scissors. So it helps me thread my needle. Now, most people, if you're like me, sometimes your eyesight is challenged. And I spent my life licking my floss and God knows what it's made of or where it's made, and then trying to thread my needle, which can be challenging. You can buy, if you've ever, you know, like if you fly first class or in hotels, they give you those little sewing kits. They come with a little wire needle threader thing. And it's the same concept as this little tip I'm going to teach you now, how to thread a needle if you're having trouble getting just doing it with your own self eyes. What I do is I cut a piece of paper, and it's a tiny piece of paper, like the size of a matchstick, because the width of this piece of paper has to pass through the eye of your needle. So I've got this little piece of paper that I cut. It's a sliver, like a shred. And then I fold it in half. Let me show it. I fold it in half, and then where the fold is, I thread that piece of paper. Come on now, don't fail me in front of my students when I'm trying to do a demo. Let me use the bigger needle. I think my paper is too thick. It's more like cardstock than you can use regular. Okay, so now I'm going to put throw that through there. Put my folded part through the needle. Now I'm going to take my floss, and I do not split my floss. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Let me just get my needle threaded. I'm going to open that little, let me see. Where's my camera? There it is. I'm going to open that little hole that the fold made, and I'm going to drop my thread into there like that. And now I'm going to pull it back through the eye, and I threaded my needle. So you push in the paper, drop, you know, where the fold is, drop your thread in, and then pull it out, and your needle is threaded. So it's kind of like an automatic needle threader. And when I was younger, I had great eyes. I could, you know, I could talk to you and thread a needle and chew gum all at the same time. So about the floss. Floss comes in 6 strands. If you were to take this and kind of untwist it apart, you'll see that there are 6 very fine strands of cotton fiber. The way I was taught to embroider was to take the length, and I'm just going to cut a length here. You cut your floss and you divide it into 2 3-strand pieces. And I don't know why that was the way it is, but if you're embroidering something, see how I took my whole big strand, let me get it up there, and I'm untwisting it to make 2 3-stranded pieces of thread. And I just kind of reverse twist it and pull it and coax it all the way down. So I have 2 pieces. But this is good if you're doing some kind of fabric if that is very sheer or a very tightly woven, like a delicate 1,000 count Egyptian cotton handkerchief. But I like to use my floss full throttle, all 6 strands. And all these pieces I've done, I think it shows up better on the dark fabric. These are all done with all 6 strands. And I just like the way that it adds real texture and oomph to the design and the surface texture of the fabric. So that's your choice. If you're using a heavier fabric like a denim or a canvas, then you might want to use 6 strands. But if you're using something really delicate and sheer, then you want to use 3 strands, because you don't want the thread and to be so heavy that it's disproportionate to the substrate, and the substrate is your fabric in this case. When I use the word substrate in art, if you're a painter, your substrate is your canvas. If you are embroidering, your substrate is your fabric. It's where you're creating on is your substrate. So we've threaded our needle. Now we have to knot the end in the opposite side of the needle. Now I don't double my thread, which would mean I bring it down where the 2 ends meet and knot it there. In embroidery, we don't do that, because then my stitches would be 12 strands instead of 6. So I did hit the record button, didn't I? Yes, okay.
Yes.
So now to make a knot, everybody makes their knots differently. And I know someone who can make a 1-hand, 1-finger knot. She just kind of rolls her fingers around and it's so professional. But I still rely on looping the floss around my index finger and then pulling the end through the loop once or twice, and then rolling it down to the end. If you roll it all the way off, you're going to roll your knot right off your fabric. But you want to roll it down to near, let me see, where is that in the camera? I'm trying to, okay, there it is. Where's the camera? There it is. So my knot is down here in the bottom. You don't want the knot a couple inches up from the bottom, because your waist, that's a waist, that's all going to be. The knot is to keep your thread from pulling through the fabric. It anchors it to the underside of the fabric. Now you might want to make 2. My knot, I like to do it again, 1 knot over the first knot. And it's kind of like a rolling with the finger kind of thing, but a nice sturdy knot is what you need. And now we're ready to go. So what I often do before I start an embroidery session is I preload a bunch of needles. Here in my little needle book, I have different needles already loaded with, I guess I went through 2 pages, with different colored floss. So I keep my flow going, so I don't have to always stop when I get to the end and reload my needle. I have a bunch ready to go in different colors. So now we've got our needle, our fabric. I would suggest getting an embroidery hoop, because it does hold your fabric taut. I will admit, when I go on the train, I used to, I haven't taken the train in over a year, but if I don't have my little hoop I don't like to lug my big hoop. It just doesn't fit in my little pouch that gets tucked in my tote bag. I like to keep things compact. Sometimes, like on this, I don't even use a hoop. I just hold it in my hand. But if you're starting out, it's good to have a hoop. And what we do with the hoop, this particular hoop has a cork on the inner hoop. So it's an outer hoop and an inner hoop, and the fabric gets sandwiched between them to hold it taut. This one has a little spring on it. Some of them have a little tightener clamp, like on this wooden one. But basically, you take the bottom of your hoop, you lay your fabric down on top of it, and then you take the top of your hoop and fit it in and smush down. So you're clamping your fabric into place. Like it, remember, if you've seen movies like Christmas movies where kids are using sheets to become a shepherd in a Christmas play, they have like a sheet over their head, and then they take a clamp or a rope and they put it around there, kind of like my little turban. So this now is going, and then you pull down on the margin around the outside of the fabric to hold that fabric tight. Like that. Just hold it tight. So now it's like a drum. It's pretty tight. And you could go back and adjust it if necessary. On certain hoops, it might have a little screw thing here to tighten it. So once you get your fabric in there, you can tighten it and undo it when you get your fabric out. Does anyone have any questions about what I've talked about so far? Because do speak up. A lot of you, oh, Ricky, I have you. Welcome. Okay, I just saw you here on the list. Let me mark you as in attendance. All right. A lot of you have your mics muted, and I can't tell if you're, if you're getting this or not. But you feel free to unmute your mic. If you have a television going on in the background or a barking dog, you might not want to. Excuse me. But feel free to ask me questions. All right, so now we have our thread. Now we've got our fabric. The way we start embroidery, we have a right side and we have a wrong side of a fabric, just like any other piece. I've got my right side, and then I've got my wrong side where you see all the knots, all the intersections of where I went from one color change to another. So when I use the term with you, when I say needles up, I mean you're going to start from underneath and bring your needle up to the top of your fabric and pull it through. And it should not pull all the way through because your knot on the reverse side is stopping it. And that's what we want, is we want to just get our needles up. And the first stitch we're going to learn today is your basic running stitch. And oh, wait a minute, I want to do a share screen. Let me go to my share screen real quick because I want to show you some of the things we'll be covering. Is this the one? Share. All right, are you seeing this sampler in front of us? At the top, you'll see the running stitch, and you'll see all kinds of variations that we'll be learning. This is just a simple little sampler that features some of the stitches that we'll be learning. But our basic stitch, as you see in that running stitch, they can be very even. They can be wide with a little amount of space in between each one, or they can be staggered, they can be uneven in length. So what I am going to do now is stop this share. I'm going to be sending all this to you. So you will be getting these images. You'll be getting the link to this Zoom. And I also will send you links to little 2-minute YouTube videos that review, excuse me, I should have gotten some water, review the stitches that we go over in class. So don't think that if you're not following along, you're thinking, oh, I can't keep up, or, you know, I got distracted. It's all going to be there for you after class. And I will be sending you supplementary handouts in case you actually want to print out these instructions and have a little folder full of stitches, because sometimes it's easier for people to print out my handouts and have them in a folder. It's quicker than going back to my old emails and trying to find an email and click on the link, and it's just more efficient use of time. So I want to share with you, oh no, we're not up to that stitch yet. Okay, so I'm not going to share. Let me just go back to me. How do I get out of this share, stop share? I don't want to share the screen. I'm sorry. Let me go back to me. How do I get the view? I'm trying to get rid of this. Okay. Oh, I know. I think I can just do that. Okay, good. That's gone. And can you see me again? Okay. All right, because I don't. Okay. Okay. All right, good. All right. Now I'm trying to get, here we are. All right. So now we've got our needle up. So a basic running stitch is when you go and make a bunch of dashes. So your needle goes down beneath the surface again, and you just make a dash like that. And then now if it's going to be easier for you to draw a faint pencil line with a ruler, that's fine. Now you're going to leave a space and come back up again with your knee, and you're just making a series of dashes across your fabric like that. And here my dashes are pretty much equal in length to the space that I have left between them. So the white space between each of these reddish colored dashes, the white space is about the same width as the stitch. And it doesn't have to be. I mean, now the other thing I want to talk about, you'll notice that the way I have made my stitches is I bring my needle up and I pull it up, and then I put it down and I pull it through the back. That produces a very flat stitch. You can also do a running stitch, and I'm going to turn this because I'm going to work the other way now to show you in the opposite direction. You can work from the top and go do all your work on top. Take your needle under the edge, skate it under the surface, bring it up, bring it down, bring it up. So you are kind of like weaving it up and down, up and down, up and down before you pull it through. Now that does slightly change the surface texture, but not really. So it really is what you're comfortable with at this stage. If you want to go all the way down. Now, you might find, like I'm seeing here, as I go up and down, my floss might start to get a little twisty. So while I am pulling it through, I kind of hold it as it's pulling through because I don't want it to get twisty and knotty. And if it does, sometimes I just let my thread dangle so it just untwists itself. It's just the oh, well, okay. I let my needle fall out. Now I gotta rethread it. Okay, this always happens. When I'm trying to teach a class, there's always an epic fail somewhere along the line, but this is not a big deal. I can just rethread my needle and keep going. So this is our basic running stitch. And I'm just going to do a couple rows of this to use up the floss on my needle. So I'm making about 3 parallel rows of this basic running stitch. And I can work on the, in fact, I'm going to do my third row. I'm going to make my stitches a little longer than the space in between. It depends on how much of a perfectionist you are. Everybody's got their own level of OCD about these things. I'm more of a wabi-sabi person who finds the beauty in imperfection. But, okay, there's my 3 rows of running stitches. And in this last row, you'll see that the space between is a little different. That's okay. That doesn't bother me. Now, when you want to finish off your stitching from behind, you're going to make another knot because you don't want these stitches to come unraveled or come undone. So what I do before I unthread my needle, let me give it a little flutter there, is I make a loop again and I hold that loop in place. I make a little loop with the thread and I just draw the needle up from underneath and hold it down with my finger to secure it and kind of coax it into place. So now I have a knot there. And like I said, everybody's got different ways of making knots. And that's actually one of the 1-minute videos I'm sending you is how to make a knot, because it might depend on if you're right-handed or left-handed, or if you've learned how to sew a long time ago and you've got your own way of making a knot. It doesn't matter, just as long as the fabric is secured, because now when I take my needle and I try and pull it up, it's not coming undone. It's all secured there. This is a basic running stitch. Before I move on to the next stitch, I want to show you a really fun way how you can trick this up and build on this. If you want to pick now a contrasting color floss, if you have it, that's fine. If you don't, let's see, I want to have another bright color. That's another reason why I don't separate my floss. This is one of the things that I pulled from the wrong edge. So now I have to tease it out. Oh, that's too short. Okay, here we go. So I'm picking a contrasting color because this will demonstrate. Let me give it a cut. Thread my needle. This is kind of a variation of what we call a couching technique, because it takes I'm threading my needle with my contrasting color. I'm putting a knot in the end. Now, usually what I do when I have the floss is my trailer, I guess the short piece that comes out of the eye of the needle. This is the length I have. I usually make my little trailer maybe a third of the way. If it's too close to the eye of the needle, like all the way up here, maybe an inch from the needle, you could pull it right out of the eye of the needle when you're doing a stitch. So, and you also don't want it all the way down near the knot, because then it'll cause problems. So usually about a third to halfway down is where I let my little tail go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to revisit where I began at one of my rows. And I'm going to needle up. I'm going to come and start at the beginning of one of the white areas, like that. Now, you could do a variation on this, is you could do a running stitch in, right here. Let me do one line like that to show you what I mean. A running stitch of contrasting color in those white spaces between my my pink stitches, my pink running stitches. So it'll look like a bicolored line of dashes with some pink dashes. And I'm doing this quickly to demonstrate for you. I'm not trying to be super exact and mathematically correct, because I will save that for another time when I'm fussing about what I'm doing. But this is for demonstration. So here I'm doing a running stitch with a different color in between and those white spaces in between. And you can go into the same hole that your thread made with the previous color. Now what I'm going to do on my next row is I'm going to come up, needle up at the beginning of a white space between two white dashes. And now my needle is going to stay on top of the surface the whole time, because now what I'm going to do, let's see if I can, I wish I was more ambidextrous. Now I'm going to just work on the top of each running stitch. My needle is going to go through it and stay on the surface and kind of like do a whip stitch, where I'm catching it, and I went from like the top down. So now I'm going to bring it over this side and go from the top down. My hand is making a shadow. Okay. And now I'm just going to slit it through, and you'll see it makes a difference. It's more of an angle, more of a diagonal, because I am working kind of like on a diagonal. So now I caught with the blue thread, the aqua thread, the edge of the pink. So I was kind of weaving in and out of the pink, and I could go back and do it the other way. Why not? So now I'm going to go and I'm going to catch it, use my, go down through the pink, go past through that pink slit, and then go down the other pink stitch, and then go down the other pink stitch. And now I've done a variation of the running stitch, and I've built up a pattern and a surface texture. So now I'm going to go to my, I have one more row. Okay, I got a little knot there. It's more like a, see, even I get unintentional knots because I was not keeping my finger on the thread as I was pulling it through. Oh, it's okay. So now we have these variations. You can go in between, and then you can do like a whip stitch over it. So that's a running stitch with the variation. Any questions before I move on to the back stitch?
Our employer is PCS, not total insurance brokerage, right? Well, no, let me play back in like 20 minutes. I can't do 20 minutes.
Nope, all good.
Okay. Okay, I wasn't sure if that conversation was for us or not. So, all right. So now I'm just going to make a fresh, I'm just going to move my hoop to a fresh area on my fabric because I want to show you a new stitch. So I just undid my hoop, and now I'm moving those stitches out of the way. So I'm making a new white area, a clean white canvas. And this is a linen that I'm using. This is some kind of linen. It's not super delicate like a handkerchief. And I do have a collection of antique handkerchiefs that I love. But I think some of them don't make sense to me, because one of them that I have, I'm threading my needle, one of them is covered in French knots, which is a decorative knot that we're going to learn. But once when I was using this handkerchief, I'm making my knot and the other end, these knots create such a bumpy surface that when you go to wipe your nose, it hurts. So if you are going to be embroidering a handkerchief, or I would even think a pillowcase or anything that's going to rub up against your face, you might want a smooth textured stitch, because these 3D stitches, you're going to feel them on your skin. Okay, so now I've threaded my needle. I made a knot, and now I'm going to do needle up. Come on the back side, and you're going to bring your needle up. So now I got to remember how to do this, because the way I learned was, oh, you know what? I'm going to put the graphic up, because now we're going to learn the back stitch, and I am going to share with you this graphic of the back stitch. All right. Now I hope you can you still see me in the little window? Can you see my hoop? Let me see. I got to get my thing up near the camera. There it
I
is.
see that, yes.
Okay. So now what I'm going to do is, let me move it this way. Okay. In the back stitch, if they do theirs from right to left, I'm going to try and do it the same way, that in the same direction they do. Okay. Back stitch there. And we're going to make one running stitch. Maybe they do it the way that I do. The way my grandmother taught me was different. So in my dyslexia, I'm trying to do it the same as it. Okay, yeah. So you're going to make one running stitch, and then leave a white area dash. Oh, seeing already, I got a knot. So I'm used to holding my, get you here, holding my thumb in place while I draw my needle through. So I have this. Okay. So we have this kind of thing, one stitch with one white space. Now this is where the back stitch comes in. You're going to take your needle and put it in, you're going to back it up and put it in that spot at the end of the first stitch. So now it looks like this, two dashes next to each other. Now I'm going to bring my needle up, leaving a white thing again, a white area. Bring my needle up there. And then back it up. And bring it back to cover up that white space that I just created. And now I'm going to advance it underneath and bring my needle up again, leaving a white space. And then bring it back down, covering up the white space into the end of that last running stitch I made. So this is the back stitch. And it's kind of like an ongoing running stitch, but you're covering up that space in between. So it looks like one long, continuous dotted line where all the dashed line, or all the dashed lines are connected.
Right?
Okay. So, and like I said, if it helps you to make a faint pencil line with a ruler, if you know, if you want to make a straight line, this I'm just eyeballing it because this is just practice. What I usually do is, you know, I'll rip out my stitching for the next class because this is just practice. You can, and if you do want to get one of those kits and make something, you know, you can make pillows, you can make coasters, you can make Christmas tree ornaments, whatever you want.
Wait,
They
so can
have-
I ask a question?
Yes,
You put the needle back in at the, where, at the end of the preceding stitch? Is that? what you
correct,
do?
correct.
Could
So
you
you're
do
kind
it
of,
one more time so I can see?
okay, so what let me bring my needle up. Nope, let me get in the camera. Bring my needle up there. And now I'm going to cover up that white space I just created because I am working from here to here. I'm working in this direction, but now I'm backing up my needle and bringing it down. So now when I bring it back up again, I'm bringing it up all the way over here. So there's a long stitch on the underside of your fabric. And now I'm bringing it down to cover that white space I just created. And now I'm going to make white space. Oops. And bring my needle up and then back it up and cover up that white space to finish my back stitch. And then, oh, I'm getting to the edge of my hoop, but let me show you one more. So you make the white space and then you cover up the white space. So it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step behind. And you should have a long line looking like that. And again, there's a way you could, if you say, okay, well, you know, I want it, that's all fine and good, but it looks a little boring. So you can do the whip stitch around it again. And I'm just going to take a contrasting color and you don't have to use a contrasting. You could make it look highly textural if you did it again in the same color. But for demonstration, I will show you how. I'm now going to apply another color over it. I could take and do like a whip stitch. This makes it's, let me bring this up.
No.
Where I'm weaving another color in, and it's all done on the top. I'm just moving the color from the needle from, I guess, left to right or right to left, and I'm wrapping the previous stitch, and it makes it's kind of twist like a barber pole or a candy cane. It makes a pretty twisted variation. Yeah, like that. So that's a pretty effect that you can make. And it's just, it's all basically a simple stitch that we're building upon. We did our basic running stitch of our dashes. And now we learned the back stitch. And to either one of those, I think it's a very pretty variation to wrap it in a contrasting color. And again, my floss is getting a little tangly, so I just let the needle drop and let it unwind itself. And I get to the end of my row. And then I bring my needle down underneath and tie my knot. And now I have a two-tone line with the aqua and the pink. That makes a nice border on something. You can also take your running stitch. I want to show you one more because we're getting to the end of the hour. I don't want to like completely overwhelm you, but I do want you to get your hour's worth. You can take your running stitch and make two of them at right angles to each other and create one. And
I still seeing your backstitch PDF, not what you were doing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me get rid of that. Now I just want to show you how I took two simple stitches at right angles to each other, and it's either a plus sign or an X, depending on how you look at it. And it's just two. Let me get rid of the screen so I can, let me get rid of the screen share, stop share. Okay. All right. So again, let me bring this up. Let me get in front of the camera so you see it. Okay. I'm making one, I'll make a big one so you can see it. I'm going to make a big stitch. Just one stitch, one running stitch. And now I'm going to make another one on top of that. And I've created an X. And you can do an entire border. Where's that sample I have? All right. I had it. I had all my stuff all laid out for class. What did I do with it? All right, it'll turn up. You can do a whole border of these X stitches. All right, it'll turn up. I know I have it because I looked at it before class. Ah, here it is. These are teeny tiny. So you could do a whole border of little X's. That'll drive you crazy. But what you can also do now is go ahead and make another X. And these are all, again, your simple, basic running stitch, but you're just making one of them. Now I'm going to make another X on top of that. So I'm coming in between the radii, I guess you'd call it, of the X. Oh, great. I just unthreaded my needle. I didn't mean to do that. All right, now I got to thread it again. Bear with me a second. You're going to make another X at like a 45 degree angle, I guess, on top of the X you just made. So you're going to be making 4 stitches, one on top of the other. So you're going to wind up with something that looks like a star. And that's exactly our star stitch. They're just one stitch. Let me draw it. Sometimes I'm much better at drawing than explaining. I need a fat magic marker. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. You're going to make one stitch this way, one stitch this way, one stitch this way and one stitch that way. And you've got a star. Again, the basic stitch. Now, a variation on that theme, which is fun, is I'm going to take a contrasting color, and this will be the last thing I show you today because I don't want your eyes to start glazing over because I'm throwing so much stuff at you. And this will all be reiterated in my follow-up email, which now that all my classes are via Zoom, I only have 1 hour to torture you. So I give you all this supplementary stuff so you can work on it at home and have visuals in front of you. So now I'm taking a contrasting color and I am going to bring it up in the middle of my star, like between 2 of the stitches, like this. My needle is up. Now I'm going to start weaving under the stitches. I'm going to go over 1 and under 1. And I'm just going to go around. Well, there's different ways you can do it. You know what? Let me go around. Let me go under all of them just to start. I'm going to go under all of them. And I'm just taking that. Let me get in the camera. I'm taking the contrasting color and I'm just going under all the stitches around and around and around. I know I keep turning my fabric and then I lose my way because I'm trying to keep you in the camera. Keep this in the camera. So I'm building up like a green spiral underneath my pink support things. It's of course it's not happening because I'm trying to demonstrate it and talk at the same time. But this is kind of like in the sampler that I'm sending you, the you'll see an Algerian eye, but it's taking your star stitch and you're going under your anchors and you're building up the swirl underneath. So your little spider legs are anchoring it in place. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can go above 1 stitch and under another, kind of like weaving it back and forth under these anchor stitches. So, and that can fill up and then you have a whole other thing you can play with because I will be teaching you established stitches, but you can make up your own stitches by piling 1 stitch onto another stitch. So you'll go round and round and basically it'll start looking like it, like that. I want to share with you one more thing. If you are the kind of person that likes book reinforcement, I have this great book on embroidery, Rebecca Ringquist Embroidery, and I'll put this in the email because she not only goes over all the step-by-steps like I did, how to thread your needle, how to do a running stitch and all the hoops and all that. She has really cool variations and projects in this book. This is one of the best books I've found because she has really cool demonstrations, but she addresses all the traditional old school stitches as well. So this is a good one. I'm not so much a book person, but this was gifted to me and I really like it. I've been given other embroidery books. This one is really mathematical and it's a little beyond my skill set because they're doing all this computation and counting where the math component alone kind of freaks me out, but it's got a lot of good stitches and we're going to be covering a lot of these as well. The local library, I'm sure, has books. And I will, like I said, I will be sending you these diagrams that have, step 1, step 2. So you'll have step-by-steps in front of you along with videos this week. And next week, we'll
Katie,
cover.
thank you very much. I have to go.
Okay, thank you. Does
you.
anyone else have questions? I realize it's past 2:00. Great. I'm going to be emailing you. You'll definitely get something by the morning. I'm going to try and work on it now. And you can always get in touch with me. I'll have my contact information in there. And I wish you all happy stitching. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.